Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. We are going to be doing something different this time, and we're going to be looking at the historical origins of Islam, focusing on the historical circumstances in which essentially that led up to Muhammad's rise. Not so much looking at Muhammad's life himself, but the political environment in Arabia in the century really leading up to his time. And Alex and I, if you've been watching our stuff and hearing us out, we have been proposing a theory which we're pretty confident of for many reasons, that really the predominant influence upon Muhammad that we believe, historically speaking, and in terms of his theology and even the formation of the Qur'an, came primarily from the Rabbinical Jewish community in Arabia. And so we started looking more at the historical circumstances, politically speaking, in Arabia. And just as we look, it didn't take much to start uncovering stones and finding things that we weren't really, looking at in the same way before. We're looking at it now with fresh eyes. For kind of seeing things as puzzle pieces fitting together. And so, we want to lay out some of what we've been finding. I'm sure that's not going to be the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yep.
Alex, you're going to pretty much do presentation and I'm going to interact along the way. So,
All right. Let's start the presentation. So, here's a big question: how Islam was born, and we're going to show you the three events that influenced the formation of the alliance between the Jews of Arabia and the local idolaters, which ultimately give rise to the religion of Islam, a religion that absorbed both pagan beliefs and rituals, as well as Pharisaic rabbinical legends and teaching. So, and the first event, I should say, it's very unusual one. Maybe people in academia knows about it, but just common people like us, we never discussed that. And it was actually, what we call it, the first and the last Judeo-Christian war. Like, when did last time you heard about it?
the Jews and the Christians fighting in battle. I mean, I've heard of persecution, but like Christian persecution of Jews.
Yeah.
But like you're talking about military, political conflict.
Yeah. Big, but a lot of people get killed as the army goes against an army. So I'm gonna show three sources of information. The first one is from the publisher, published about 10 books about Christianity. Very interesting books and very solid information there. And we're going to use only one book which relate to Islam, right? Also, we're going to use Atlas of Prophets Biography. It's done, printed by Muslims. And of course, we're going to use our ChatGPT, our new sheikh, who knows almost everything. Before we're going to go into the deep dive into that, into these books and information, I'm going to show you, look at today's map of Arabia and ancient map of Arabia, or medieval map.
Pretty important that people understand where things are. Yeah.
So as we see, we have Yemen, Sana, Najran, almost on the border of Yemen and Saudi Arabia, and also Mecca, of course. Here's another map. And now that's modern day map, right? So now let's go back to 6th century map. And the closest I find is 555 AD, the map of Byzantium Empire. And we could see how vast was it at that time. Now we have another map of the Muslim map that they show Mecca, of course, Sana, Najran. And now what we're going to be looking at, it's a map of what will show us religious majority and minority.
Kingdoms, empires. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So on the top we see Sassanid Empire, which is like Zoroastrians, the Persians, and they have just on the bottom of it, of the Persian Empire, we have Lakshmi tribe of Arabs who were Christians, Nestorian Christians. And of course we have Byzantine Empire on the left, and they've been at war with the Persians for decades and decades. And also we have a Christian Egypt, we have Christian Abyssinia, Azum.
Maybe just go to the previous map because it shows the name.
Yeah. So we have Egypt, Byzantine Empire, Syria, Abyssinia, Yemen. They're all Christian countries at that time. Well, Yemen has a little bit of Jewish, well, no, I shouldn't say a little bit, quite a lot of Jewish population at that time.
Yeah.
And of course, Jewish population was present in Hijaz area, Yathrib, Haybar, prominent population. And it happened because, of course, Jews were pushed and squeezed by the Christian to go into the lands when they can actually live in relative freedom as being governed by their own laws, right? Anyway, so let's deep dive into the information, into the history of 500s. So the 523 AD, we call it Yemen Massacre, the first Jewish-Christian war. In 523 AD, the major religious political conflict broke out of Najran, a city of southern Arabia, modern-day Yemen, then part of the Himyarite kingdom. The Jewish king of Himyarite, the Jewish king of Himyar, Dhu Nuwas, launched a violent persecution of Christians in the region, particularly targeting the city of Najran, which had a wealthy and influenced Christian population. And here is a map which we could, see the borders of that empire. And
so this is Yemen there.
Yeah, that's modern-day Yemen, more or less, right? Now we're going to go to this book, Christian publishing book, Sword of Islam. And what is said here, so that after the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70 and the failure of the Jewish rebellion 6 decades later, Jewish refugees has fled south into Arabia. By the mid-5th century, they had established numerous communities, even converting members of Himyarite royal household. The two faiths remained mutually hostile, and the Christians were outnumbered by the Jews. This is very interesting because everywhere, of course, the Christians were outnumbering the Jews, but only in that Yemen area, it was opposite. The Jews were numerous than Christians.
It's also really interesting because we don't normally think of Jews converting people. So
yep.
Here it's saying that they converted members of the Himyarite royal household. I mean, I'd love to have more information on that.
Yeah. Well, here's another one. The cause of catastrophe that befell the Christians, however, was in the main political. Another Ethiopian invasion seized control of a major south coast ports. The Romans, through the treaty with those invaders, took over virtually all trades, a double disaster for the Jews in Saudi Arabia. Not only they were losing their share of caravan business, but their country was being conquered by Christians of Ethiopia, backed by Rome. So now we have a problem. The Jews in Yemen, in Himyarite kingdom, they felt under the pressure now. The years ago, the Jews flee down in Saudi Arabia, escaping the Roman persecution. They're converting the local Arabs to the Judaism, and they thought they'll be living there fine, right? Forever, kind of. But suddenly Christians start pressing from Ethiopia mainly, and on the top, on the north was Byzantium. So they felt very insecure now. Well, as Ethiopian forces moved north, the Jews naturally fought back, at first suffering military reverses. So here's again. So we have this map, and we could see that the Jews were surrounded, like area of Arabia, where the Jews were living at that time, in relative safety, governed by their own laws, in their own communities, now being squished around by the Christians. And Ethiopian Christians were pushing into trying to evangelize Arabs. And it was the outpost in Yemen, many coastal cities, including the prominent one, Najran. So now the Jews felt really insecure again, once more. So by then, in and around 523 AD, a new king arose among them. This destroyed the army of the intruders, meaning Ethiopian. And his name was Dhu Nuwas. So
Curly locks. That's
yeah,
weird.
curly locks. Find the name.
That's like he is the Jew girl or something.
So for now, it's like we could see, like we don't know the origins of Dhu Nuwas, but people say, well, maybe he was a convert to Judaism, like most of the royal family was, and maybe locals definitely. But also he could be Israelite as well, or his mother was Israelite. Who knows, right?
Yeah, right.
But definitely he was raised as a Jew. That's no doubts about it. When there is a funny part of it, the Arab's account claimed he was homosexual.
Let me read maybe from the first line of the previous. Dhu Nuwas' origins are obscure, but whether he was descended from converts or Israelites, his mother was probably a slave captured by Christian Arabs, sold to the Himyarite court. He apparently was raised a Jew. Arab accounts claim he was homosexual. One says he gained the throne after killing another contender who was trying to force him to be his lover.
Ouch. Yeah. Now let's have ChatGPT, so you can read it.
Okay. So, Judaism as the state strategy of Himyar. So King Dhu Nuwas chose Judaism as a political and religious alternative to Christianity and Zoroastrianism. Judaism already existed in Arabia at that time, for example, in Yathrib, which is Medina, and Khaybar. Judaism lacked a centralized theocracy like Christianity, such as in Byzantium and Ethiopia, making it a convenient tool for asserting independence. Interesting. Embracing Judaism secured neutrality or even support from the Sassanids, traditional rivals of Byzantium. Thus, Dhu Nuwas aimed to preserve religious independence from Christian Ethiopia, strengthen internal power through confessional unity, and eliminate potentially dangerous Christian communities that could act as a fifth column. Christianity as a tool of influence for Byzantium and Aksum. Christian missions from Ethiopia and Byzantium operated successfully in southern Arabia, especially in the city of Najran. So that's interesting that there's a lot of missions work. I remember reading this with you and kind of being surprised. I just kind of assumed back then they wouldn't really do that much.
Yeah.
But I guess, and it's saying it's coming from the north and the south, from the Byzantines and the Abyssinians, Ethiopians. Okay, there a wealthy and educated Christian community emerged that's in Najran, and they maintained strong ties with Aksum, had its own bishopric and clergy, served as a channel for Ethiopia's political and religious influence. For Dhu Nuwas, this posed a threat to national security, especially after uprisings inspired by Christian preachers. That's interesting.
Christian
I wonder what they were preaching.
I know.
Okay, so then back to stuff about Dhu Nuwas. So also one chronicle says he escaped the Ethiopian invasion by hiding in the mountains. Another that he disguised himself as a Christian. Still another that it was not a disguise, that he had accepted baptism.
Well, I mean, like, what spectrum? Nobody knows what happened with him. It's so funny to see, like, we can't even pinpoint anything. It's just everything is obscure.
Is this the end of his time?
Well, before he became a king, I believe.
Okay. Okay, in any event, his national alliance of Jewish, pagan, and some Nestorian Christians against the monophysite Ethiopians achieved rapid success.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? They start getting alliances together. Mm-hmm. The reason is because the Christian missionaries were very active.
Okay. So he besieged Zophar, the Himyarite capital, lured out the mostly Christian defenders with a pledge of clemency, then herded them into their new church and burned it. Much the same was reportedly done at Mukah, a port city on the Red Sea coast. Dhu Nuwas then turned his attention to Najran, a formidable prospect militarily, financially, and psychologically.
Yeah, now we're going to talk about the massacre of Najran.
Okay, so not just a pogrom, but an act of state policy. The events of 523 were a deliberate act of intimidation aimed at the complete elimination of Christian presence in the region, demonstrating Dhu Nuwas's power and establishing Judaism as the state ideology. Wow, I feel like this is, other than ancient Israel, this is the only other state, it's almost like the only other state of Israel outside of Israel, the modern state of Israel, right?
It was another one up north in Caucasus area, Azars.
Okay.
But these ones are basically in the same area of Middle East, which is...
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I didn't know about this before. Okay, so, and it also aimed at provoking Byzantium and Aksum to portray himself as a victim of Christian aggression in the rhetoric of diplomacy with Persia. However, the outcome was the opposite. The massacre caused outrage in the Christian world, and Byzantium and Aksum gained moral justification for military intervention. So, because the Byzantines were up north, and they're not really coming down to do stuff, because so they, what is it? I think they supported probably financially the Ethiopians to intervene. Yeah.
And basically, that's. We're not going to talk about all details, but definitely Dhu Nuwas, he again offered clemency for Najranites, or the people who defenders. He promised them freedom of worship. They accepted the terms of surrender, and he broke the terms of surrender and started killing them. So it said almost all Najran leaders now were dead. This is pretty much. It's almost like, let's read more about it.
I feel like that's the original freedom from religion instead of freedom of religion.
Yeah.
Okay. So about the Najran massacre. So Christians were ordered to convert to Judaism or be executed. Wow. Thousands refused and were burned alive, beheaded, or tortured. Islamic, Christian, and Byzantine sources speak of 20 to 30,000 deaths. The Qur'an refers to this in Surah Al-Buruj, Surah 85, verses 4 to 8. Cursed were the people of the trench, watching the believers burn.
Yeah, it was some kind of Holocaust in the reverse. So the Jews are creating Holocaust for non-Jews. And now it will be interesting. Here's a story of Ruhaima, who was a Christian lady, prominent lady, and she was arrested. She was offered to keep her. She could keep her wealth if she will denounce Christ, accept Judaism, and she could be also married one of the leader of that attackers, because her husband was dead or killed by them. But she publicly appealed to other women still alive to follow her example and spat in Dhu Nuwas' face. So she was beheaded along with one of her daughters and little granddaughter. That's too much, even for those guys, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would expect her to be killed, but not the family.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll read that paragraph. For the Christians of Najran, it was over, but not for Dhu Nuwas. The treatment accorded Ruhaima, it is said, rapidly caused disaffection and rebellion among his supporters. They taxed him with reminders of Ruhaima's generosity to his father, of her legendary popularity among people of all faiths, and of the fact that she had not even been given decent burial. For this, and probably other reasons as well, dissension soon spread in his army.
Yeah, that was the first big mistake. Well, even people, his supporters were really, they have hearts, I think, right? We could say.
Well, especially he killed a daughter and granddaughter.
Yeah, I mean, like, now this interesting happened.
Okay, so much alarmed, he sent a messenger north to the Lakhmid court of Mundir, urging that he too kill all Christians in his jurisdiction. The Christian faith, Dhu Nuwas assured him, was obviously perishing.
Well, that was a second mistake he did. Here's what he said.
That's a great exaggeration.
Mhm.
Can you
Oh,
think?
yeah.
I mean, he hasn't defeated the Byzantines even yet, so I mean, how
Not
are you?
even Ethiopians,
I know.
just
I mean, it's
defeated
like,
local guys.
yeah. Okay, so this proved to be his last miscalculation. Mundir's best general was a Nestorian Christian, and through the Lakhmid court, the story of the Najran massacre reached Constantinople.
So it's interesting. Well, it's almost like a story repeats itself. And it's like Haman tried to talk to Esther without knowing that Esther is a Jew.
Right. Okay.
So he's talking to the locksmith, saying, "Hey, let's kill the Christians." Well, those guys are Christians. And it was like a Persian Empire, because look at this, right? So they are like Persian,
Right.
like next to Persia, right? So anyway, so what happened now? We have a counteroffense was launched from Ethiopia, in which Dhu Nuwas was killed. Now let's read the short thing about it.
All right. The Aksumite response in 525. Ethiopian Christian king Caleb invaded Yemen with support from Byzantium. Dhu Nuwas was defeated. Himyar was placed under Christian Ethiopian control. Abraha, a general of Caleb, later seized power and ruled Yemen independently. So he sounds kind of like a tyrant.
Oh yeah, later. Like
Okay, so
everybody
the
else.
significance, yeah. This was the first recorded military conflict between Jews and Christians in the Middle East. It served as a prelude to the religious mosaic of Arabia before the advent of Islam. Islamic tradition recognized both Christians and Jews as people of the book, yet also viewed their divisions and violence with criticism. Dhu Nuwas's uprising is a striking example of how religion in the ancient world functioned as a tool of geopolitics.
I wonder if they knew about geopolitics. They just act like normally, like for normal people at that time, right?
Right.
So now, who is Abraha?
Okay, well, he was a Christian general from Aksum, became ruler of Yemen after defeating Dhu Nuwas. So now the Christians take over, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
So built a massive cathedral in Sana'a to compete with Mecca's Kaaba. He wanted to shift a religious pilgrimage from Mecca to his capital.
That's we coming to the second very
Well,
interesting.
what is, I wonder what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to do about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's not only doing that. Let's read that part on the top.
Okay, so the counteroffensive produced yet another Christian regime in South Arabia, this one under the iron rule of a renegade Ethiopian general named Ashram Abraha, who claimed that a vision of Christ directed him to launch a mission to the South Arabian Jews. Is the mission military?
Well, it could be both, right? Most likely, yeah.
Sounds like Constantine. He had a vision of a cross, and then okay. Anyway,
and that's a very interesting part.
So, okay, with Dhu Nuwas perished the last Jewish state in the Middle East until the founding of Israel more than 1,400 years later.
Yeah, that's very significant.
Among the first settlers in the state of Israel were 100,000 Jews airlifted from Yemen. Many of them were probably descendants of Dhu Nuwas and Himyarites. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I have a personal connection.
They did the original Aliyah.
Yeah. Well, now I have a personal connection with somebody from Yemen, and that's a guy, right? So his name is Gideon Levitan. He was born in Israel, but his father was from Yemen. He was that guy who came. He was airlifted, I guess, right? In the beginning of the state of Israel. And I think, like Gideon Levitan, definitely he is a Christian, and he was I could call it rabbi or teacher, the Bible teacher, whom I learned a lot, especially the Old Testament and New Testament in the light of Old Testament, which is just amazing by itself. So he has his ministry also, and it's kind of interesting to see, like, probably his ancestors, like 1,400 years ago, maybe even being an army of Dhu Nuwas fighting Christians, and now 1,400 years later, if they are descended, one of them, it became a Christian, and he became like a leader, and well, I won't say pastor probably, but definitely he's leader of the ministry, and it's
outreach, maybe.
Outreach, yeah, definitely outreach, and it's like it's always been a blessing to hear him. So now we're coming to the second event, which is a little bit funny. Well, that's defecation in the cathedral of Sana. Let's go back to, and again, who is Abraham? What he want?
Yeah, he was a Christian general from Aksum and became ruler of Yemen after defeating Dhu Nuwas and built a massive cathedral, so a church, in Sana'a to compete with Mecca's Kaaba, and that was Al-Qulay's, right? That's the name of the church. He wanted to shift religious pilgrimage from Mecca to essentially to Sana'a.
So now he wants to rival. He wants to basically end pagan idol worshiper in Arabia. That's his mission. He had a vision of Christ, he claimed, right? So now we could see if now the Yemen, more or less subjugated by the Christians, and most of the Jews are fleeing up north to Hijaz. Now they are like in a sandwich between Christians. Christians surround them all over the place, so nowhere to go, no place to hide for them, right? And pagan Arabs, still okay. They don't care about the Jews living next to them, because pagans usually they have no restriction on religion. You can have your own god. I have my own idol. Whatever, we're all good, right? Now I want to show you something very interesting, because I'll go back to the same map of Byzantium Empire, and it's interesting that in 555 it said that Petra was in jurisdiction of Christians, and Mecca is nowhere near; it's far away. So this indication also gives us more assurance that idea what Muhammad was born in Petra, or Islam was born somewhere in Petra or in that area doesn't work, because first of all, there's no Jewish present there significant. Second of all, it was a Christian present there, so there is no room for illiterate bunch of Arabs who could be persuaded by the new religion. So that all have to be brewed, kind of down south somewhere. Like maybe it's not the Mecca, but nevertheless it should be the Hijaz. It cannot be in Petra. It cannot be in Levant or nearby, because if it Ghassanid Christians, Arab, who've been east, let's say with modern day Jordan, they cannot produce Islam from amongst them. They were been already Christians. So it definitely shows us that what like idea of Muhammad never existed, or Muhammad was not from Hijaz. It doesn't really work. Knowing geography and knowing the political powers at this time. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I also just think when you know the theology better, it's no way it's a Christian heresy.
Yes.
And I think when that becomes clear, then you need a context that is Jewish more. And so that's not going to fit there. So I'm just thinking, like, for people unfamiliar, Islam denies original sin. Islam denies the need for blood atonement. It's got Tawheed, the strict Unitarian oneness of God. It denies theophanies, that God ever would come in any physical way and manifesting in a physical way. And
kosher law, so to speak, semi-kosher.
There's dietary restrictions, right? All of these things are Islamic, but they're also rabbinical. And so the difference is not just about the view of Jesus. And I think the Christians are so hung up on just thinking about Jesus that all they're seeing is the contrasting picture the Qur'an has about Jesus with the Christian beliefs about Jesus. But what about the contrasting picture about especially Adam? Like that's huge. And everything in the Qur'an essentially is coming from rabbinical legends and the midrashic accounts about the angels, objecting to God making a man because it's going to cause corruption on the earth, and then the challenge about the naming and God giving revelation to Adam.
Yeah,
I mean that's all in straight midrash. It's not coming from the Christians. And the belief, it's not only the midrashic stuff, it's the beliefs that come with it. So how would you generate, if we're not accepting Islam as a real thing from God? So for us to explain it historically, we have to look at looking at the similarity of beliefs and the elements that are in the Quran and everything. And that's pointing almost entirely to rabbinical influence, with only minor things from Arabian legends and stuff.
A heretical Christian sect.
Yeah, so you're gonna have to then. It's not gonna be in an area where the Jews are not really present and it's dominated by Christianity in Petra.
Yeah.
So you need to place. Well, where is that gonna? That's gonna be Central Arabia, where there's Jewish tribes, and there isn't a predominant Christian influence, and you need to have a lot of pagan elements because there's a lot of pagan elements in it too. So really, that's it. It's Jewish and
pagan.
Arabian paganism.
Yeah, nothing to do with Christians at all.
And that actually, if you just think about it, that itself tells us where it happened. It's got to be Central Arabia.
So
okay, so yes, 570. The cathedral in Sana'a, known as Al-Qulis, became a key flashpoint in the conflict between Christian Abyssinians, the Aksumites, and Arab polytheists, particularly those of Mecca. And what was Al-Qulis? It was a grand cathedral built by Abraha al-Sharam, whatever it is. Okay. The Christian viceroy of Yemen, appointed by the Christian kingdom of Aksum, Ethiopia. It was constructed in Sana'a, modern-day capital of Yemen, to rival the Kaaba in Mecca and divert pilgrimage and religious focus from the Kaaba to a Christian center of worship. Why did Abraha build it? To promote Christianity in Arabia, to undermine Mecca's religious and economic significance by providing a more magnificent alternative.
Mm-hmm.
It was richly adorned, reportedly by Byzantine support, featuring marble, gold, and mosaics.
Yeah.
So what happened in 570? According to the Arab historical and Islamic sources, especially Ibn Ishaq and later biographies, man or men from Quraysh or allied Arab tribes desecrated the cathedral, that's Al-Qulis and Sana. Accounts vary. Some say he defecated in the cathedral. That means pooped. Others say he vandalized or burned a part of it. This act was seen as a deliberate insult to Christianity and to Abraha personally.
So we're gonna look the pages of that atlas.
Yeah,
and that's
Islamic
exactly
atlas.
Yeah. So we have a map and we have explanation who's giving it, right?
Yeah. So
basically the same thing, but we can read from Islamic source.
Yeah. So the Abyssinians ruled Yemen after Himyar, and when Abraha al-Sharam became king, he built a huge church called Al-Qulis and Sana beside Gumdan, the like of which had never been seen at that time. He built it of marble and gold-plated wood. His aim was to divert the pilgrimage of the Arabs to this church and to abolish the Hajj to the Kaaba. When news of that spread among the Arabs, a man from Kinana got very angry. He went to Al-Qulis and defecated in it at night. Then he fled home.
Yeah, probably something like that.
That's ChatGPT's attempt.
Yeah, attempt to do it.
Right. So when news of that reached Abraha, he became angry and swore to go to the Kaaba and destroy it.
Well, yeah, and that's ChatGPT tells the same thing.
Abraha, furious, launched the expedition of the elephant to attack and destroy the Kaaba in Mecca. He marched with a large army, including a famous war elephant called Mahmud in tradition. This event is immortalized in the Qur'an in Surah Al-Fil 105.
So now we're talking about the third event. So the second event triggered the third event, which is military expedition against Kaaba. And that's, again, the picture of AI generated on the right. And we're going to focus on the small detail, which is written in that book.
Okay, so Abraha set out from Sana to Qatam, then to Ta'if, from where he sent a man of his people to Makkah al-Mukarrama, who confiscated the wealth of its people, including 200 camels belonging to Abdul Muttalib ibn Hashim, and that is the grandfather of Muhammad.
And then he is coming back. He wants to, they realize, basically, the Quraysh, then they cannot fight against the Christian army. And Abdul Muttalib decided to talk to Abraha. And that's very strange report here.
Yeah. So, do you want me to read there from where he starts speaking?
Yeah.
He says, by Allah...
No, let's go for when Abraha saw him.
Oh, okay, sure. When Abraha saw him, he was impressed by him. He did not want to make him sit beneath him, but he also did not want the Abyssinians to see him sitting next to him on his throne.
Yeah, that's kind of weird, because Abraha wants to almost kill a lot of pagans who just desecrated his own cathedral. And now he sees one of these, like, dirty pigs, so to speak, and he gets impressed. Like, doesn't make sense to me, but it's okay. I mean,
neither does Abdul Muttalib said to him, by Allah, we do not want to fight him.
Mm-hmm.
right? Why would he be talking about Allah?
I know, that's interesting. We're gonna look at that in a bit more details.
Okay.
So he said, "What do you want?" And Abdul Muttalib spoke about his camels, which had been taken. Abraha said, "I admire you when I first saw you, but now I have changed my mind. Now I don't like you anymore. And you speak to me about 200 camels that I took from you, and you ignore the house, which is a focal point of your religion and of your forefathers, which I have come to destroy, and you don't speak about it." That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, he's only cares about his camels, not the Kaaba.
And he explained it very interesting way, right? Abdul Muttalib said, "I am the owner of the camels, and the house has owner who will protect it."
Oh.
So now it's interesting now. Then Abdul Muttalib took hold of the door handle of the Kaaba. He returned back with 200 camels. Yeah. And some Quraysh stood with him, praying to Allah and seeking his help against Abraha and his army. Like according to Islamic tradition, beliefs, Abdul Muttalib is a mushrik pagan. He's burning in hell right now. But in this story, he is like acting like amazing, almost like Abraham.
He's almost a prophet.
He's like a prophet. He said, "I believe in Allah. Let's seek the help of Allah." And I don't think it happened, but we'll tell.
Well, it's interesting. He says an owner who will protect it. I mean, I thought it had about 360 owners.
Yeah.
Wasn't it filled with 360 idols? Why is he saying, speaking of one owner?
Yeah, it does make sense.
And they all start praying to Allah.
Yeah, for mushrik, not really. And now he said, "Oh Allah, any slave of yours would protect his position. So protect your house." And it's very interesting. Do not let their cross or their power defeat your power. So cross meaning Christians, right? But if you are going to let them destroy the Qibla, there must be a reason for that. So it's very
it's like fatalistic, right?
Yeah. But the problem is why Abdul Muttalib could not invoke Allah, simply because the chief god of the Quraysh tribe was not Allah but Hubal, that chief idol. So he was the owner of the house. His statue was inside, right? So it was the principal deity of Kaaba. So it was, as you see location, it was like inside the Kaaba in a human-shaped idol. Oh, red agate. So it's very really, really very called cost a lot of money to produce, I guess, right?
Right, yeah.
So anyway, and we will ask if the Kaaba didn't belong to the single idol. That's the whole idea, the shrine. You need to build a big shrine to put so many idols inside, and there was not enough space to put idols on the top. They put idols next to it. So to say it belongs, as you said, it should belong to 360 gods. I mean, owners, not one, right? It doesn't make sense.
It's almost an army in itself.
Yeah.
When Abraha prepared to enter Mecca with his largest elephant seeking to destroy the Kaaba, every time they made the elephant face Mecca, it sat down and refused to move. But when they made it face any other direction, it started to run.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and Allah sent against them birds in flocks, one after another, from the sea, birds like swifts or swallows, each of them carrying 3 stones, 1 in its beak and 2 in its feet, with which they pelted them.
Mm-hmm.
And Allah sent a flood which washed them into the sea. Those who were spared turned and fled with Abraha to Yemen. His body had started to disintegrate, but he did not die in Sana'a until his chest had fallen away from his heart.
Oh, I think it should be the other way around.
He did it in 571.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting because it's most likely some kind of disease struck the army and they fled.
Yeah, obviously this is kind of legendary embellishment, but
hmm
yeah, probably he got sick or had a heart attack or something, and they probably
Yeah,
turned me back.
he was old at that time already. But let's see what the Quran said.
Based on the importance of this event, the Arabs started to date their history from this point. And it says in Surah 105, "Have you, O Muhammad, not seen how your Lord dealt with the owners of the elephant?"
Yeah, so that's surah, which is 5 verses only. That's talking about, like how Allah destroyed them and send the birds and kill them, right? So,
It's almost like a play on words, owners of the elephant.
yeah.
Like the owners of the Kaaba, the owner of the Kaaba.
And that's, of course, the nice view of what could be done by poor Abraha and his army. Anyway, so what it said here, basically,
So
it
he
will
was
repeat basically the same thing.
Yeah, sure.
And what it said here, significance, it's marked the failure of Christian expansion in Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever it happens, it actually stopped Christianizing of Arabia for good, I should say. And unless some missionaries start coming in, but not on that that scale of military expedition.
Well, maybe he was the one that had. If Abraha died, he got sick and died, and that caused them to turn the army back instead of the bird craziness. Maybe he was the one who really had the zeal to do it, and so.
Well, usually like that. So if the owner, leader of the army or king is dying, everybody said, okay, like let's go back. So we have something else to do. It's not like everybody wants to destroy the Kaaba. It's his desire. Anyway,
and if he also was more personally insulted by,
maybe
that's why somebody else didn't see the need to go take the Kaaba.
Or I should say, maybe it was a disease among the army and many people died. That's enough for everybody to run away thinking, especially people at that time, they were superstitious. So you see the 1 dead, 2 dead, or maybe 5 dead, and you're like freaking out. It's like
or maybe they thought even like there was some curse that came from them.
Exactly.
Destroy it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you never know. Anyway, so what happened is, as the Jews and even polytheists being threatened by Christians, and they repelled the army. Something happened, and Abraha fell back. But the Jews and probably Arabs, well, I'm not sure about Arabs, but Jews probably realized that another 50 or 100 years or 200 years, the Christianity will come in, and there is no way for polytheists to remain as a religion because they've been all over the areas. They just falling into the Christianity at that time. So it was very dire situation for the Jews and also for the Arabs who've now been threatened by the common enemy. And if the enemy of your enemy is your friend. So that forged an alliance that we can understand why the Jews and Arabs, some Arabs, meaning Muhammad ibn Abdullah, came to the agreement and they start working together to the common goal to forge an alliance. So that's why we could see, that's why we see so much influence of the Jewish rabbis in Muhammad when he was talking in the Quran about Midrash and details, quite a lot of details on Midrash account, right? So it's really, I think it just show us, situation on the ground, show us that the Jews and the Arab polytheists, some of them at least saying, you know what, we better come along together as allies against these Christians who will obliterate us or kick us out, and where we're going to go, right? And I think the Jews thought, okay, maybe we can convert these Arabs, not like we did with Yemenites, convert them to the Judaism. We're going to convert them to the semi-Judaism.
Yeah, to Noahide.
Noahide, yeah. So let's keep them like separate from us, but they will support us because they will be against Trinitarian Christians. They will be against everything what Christians believe, like not only Trinity, but sonship of Christ and His divinity, and also crucifixion, right? So that's why Quran is filled with the stories, like denying crucifixion, denying deity of Christ, denying Trinity. So whatever the Jews told Muhammad, they make sure this has been written in the Quran, like in a stone almost, right? And it's actually worked. And it's interesting part because the Jews, I think they want to have alliance with the like really friends who will be numerous differently. The Arabs are numerous than the Jews, and we see the conquest of the Arabs. They've been really numerous and they've been powerful. So the Jews saw them as a formidable friend, and they decided to convert them first, so the Christians won't have a chance to convert them to Christianity and then turn them against Jews, right? So they kind of protect them from that angle, but they didn't know then eventually the Muhammad will turn against them and start causing the problem simply because he said, oh, if you call me a prophet of Arabs, and I am prophet to Arabs, but not only to Arabs, I'm the prophet of Allah to everybody else, including you, so you must follow me. And when he said, well, if Moses been alive now, he will follow me. And that's blasphemy to every Jew at that time or today. So the Jews basically said, no, thank you. They created him. How come they can accept him? It's bizarre, right?
Yeah, I think that obviously they would have been motivated to preserve their identity, right? So they don't want to assimilate. They don't want to assimilate to Christianity, and now they don't want to assimilate to him. But they could help him. Like if maybe he's already started the movement without them, right? And then they join in. It's hard to tell exactly, but probably they're joining in early. He's probably had some influence from them to some degree already, and they see the opportunity to help shape the movement so that it's friendly to them. I think you see the Quran; it's pretty repeatedly positive about the Torah and seeing itself, the Quran and Muhammad, as coming in continuity with the Torah, but not just continuity, but now it's surpassing it, and I think that aspect where it's not like, I think of Surah 291 where they're kind of like the Jews are being offered the Quran and they're saying like, no, we'll follow our scripture, right? It's like, we're good with ours. Maybe it's fine what you got, like you go and run with it, but we're good with the Torah. We don't need to follow that. And it's like, no. You said this is essentially, putting it in my paraphrase.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you guys said that this is in continuity with it, but now you don't want to accept it. Like, it's not just for us. It's in keeping with what you got, and this is the ultimate now. This is for everybody, and I think that it makes sense to me too because it's the unifying force for the Arabs.
Yep.
So why would they not join in?
Yep.
Like, they want to remain distinct within that. Like, no, we're all in the same family here.
And the Arabs were not like monolith, right? So they worship different gods, different tribes. So for Muhammad saying, hey, if you're okay for me to unify all tribes, all sorts of people, you are not different. You're the one of like them, and you live among us. And most likely, the Jews of Yathrib being mainly converted Arabs to Judaism. So that could be an issue as well, right? So that's why he was like saying, hey guys, you have to follow suit. I'm your leader too. So submit, but they don't want to do it. Especially they don't want to give up the Torah. that's a big thing, right? Not only thinking about Moses could be like, there's no way for Moses to follow Muhammad, but to like let go Torah and go with the Quran, that's big no. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So like, that's why they prefer to die or being expelled. And as we see now for 1400 plus years, the Jewish communities in general, they're not converted to Islam unless in difficult circumstances. And they keep identity even among living among Christians as well, right? All the Muslims, doesn't matter. So they hold on to their Torah.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter how Christians try to convert them, or the Muslims try to convert them, or Muhammad specifically, so they've been stubbornly following the Torah or what they thought. Because we know that the Jews at the time of Muhammad were not the Jews of the time of Jesus or before.
Yeah.
They have different belief system. So we cannot really say that Judaism of Muhammad, time of Muhammad, was Rabbinical Judaism. No, it was already heretical Rabbinical Judaism at that time. So anyway, so to conclude our kind of talk is because the two enemy, like they have Arabs, polytheist Arabs, and Jews, they have a common enemy who is surround them and pressing from probably all sides, kind of more or less from the south. They decided to marry each other, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Arab and polytheist and the Jews, they produce a union which brought up the child, and that's what they call Islam.
Mm-hmm.
So today we basically explain what could have happened, and most likely it happens because of political situation. The Jewish community be threatened by the Christians, and they lost the last kingdom on the Yemen 45 years before Muhammad was born. At the year of Muhammad was born, Arab polytheists miraculously escaped destruction of the Kaaba by the same Christians. So they said, oh, we're going to form alliance. We have to do something together. And let's teach this Muhammad Abdullah. He looks like he understands that one God is better than many.
Mm-hmm.
So let's raise him as an ally. And Islam was born out of this unlikely union, I should say. And that's basically the conclusion of our lecture today.
Mm-hmm.
So,
very fascinating.
I hope it's been interesting for you guys, and write the comments. But I think this also will resurrect the topic of existence of Muhammad, or a standard Islamic narrative called as sin. It has a valid point, and I think it does.
Yeah, and I think in a way we are agreeing with the standard Islamic narrative. We're just obviously disagreeing with it having divine origins.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. But otherwise, the kind of historical way that it's describing it, yeah, we can get on board with that.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for watching.
All right.
Bye-bye.